Welcome to the WOVA Circle, real talk on fertility, wellness, and trying to conceive. I'm Gabby Paychev, founder of WOVA Health and fertility educator. This podcast is your community space for navigating the path to parenthood with evidence-based insights, authentic conversations, and genuine support. I'm dedicated to being here with you through every part of your journey. Today, I'm joined by someone really special, Sylvie Boland. She's a fertility nutritionist, certified personal trainer, and a life coach who brings a very grounded, holistic approach to preconception care. She's also part of the WOVA network, supporting individuals on their trying to conceive journey, offering a unique blend of nutrition, movement, and mindset. So, Sylvie, welcome. Would you share a little bit about yourself, your story?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I guess about 15 years ago, I became a personal trainer and I was very lucky to get hired at Equinox as my first job. And Equinox is a big corporate gym. One thing that they do very well is they really further the education of their trainers. So I was able to go from being someone that ran and went to classes to someone who really understood how to strength train, how to help people of all ages and demographics and ability levels to learn how to strength train and be in a great community of people that really valued being strong. And it really changed my relationship with my own body and exercise to going from trying to exercise to be the smallest person in the room to be someone that is really truly healthy. And once I started to really understand health from a strength aspect, it really motivated me to start understanding health in a broader space.
Mhm.
What were the chemicals that I was using? What was the food that I was eating? What was the air like that I was breathing? And it was a slow burn through my late 20s into my early 30s. And then the pandemic happened halfway through my 30s.
Mhm.
And it really sparked me to start questioning a lot of things that I had always believed, which is, why was everyone so sick? And I started to challenge the status quo in a way that I never had before. I'd been passionate about teaching clients about balanced eating and getting strong and not having too many chemicals or plastics in their food. But I really was motivated to take it to the next level. And also around this time, I decided that I was not going to wait for a partner to have kids, that becoming a mom was my number one priority. And since I wasn't necessarily in a rush, I really started to focus on what would help me achieve the healthiest kids. And I thought that would be like a great gift that I could pay it forward. So I just started learning as much as I possibly could about how
Mhm.
to create the healthiest babies. And I became really passionate about that. And through learning different things and experimenting on myself, I realized I was getting a lot healthier and was able to offer even more insight into my clients' health. And that was when I decided to take it to the next level and become a nutritional therapy practitioner. So I went to school for that while I was in the process of getting pregnant and having my first baby. And that was just a great gift. And then quickly after, I decided to get pregnant again. So that's like a very small nutshell of what I've been doing.
Thanks for sharing. I really love that you are so proactive to make sure that your kids are the healthiest. You have to make sure you're at your healthiest. So it makes total sense. How do you define body literacy, especially in the context of fertility? I think a lot of people think of it as you're tracking the cycles, the symptoms, but is it more than that? What about emotions, the mind, the spirit? Because I feel like a lot of people who've been trying to conceive for a while, it brings up so much more than just your physical body. It's way more than that.
I completely agree. And I also agree with the statement about being proactive. It's so interesting. Every time I read a book about fertility or eating during pregnancy or anything along those lines, I'm like, oh, this is very practical advice that I would give any client, man or woman, that a lot of people just don't care until they're really trying to get pregnant or having trouble getting pregnant.
Mhm.
Health is important to everyone, no matter what stage of life you are in. And I think focusing on different seasons and changing what's going on for the season of life that you're in is a big part of body literacy. So, yes, when you have a goal in mind, whether it's getting pregnant or running a marathon, it can feel really trying when obstacles come up. So let's say
Mhm.
you just wanted to be pregnant 6 months ago and things just are not progressing at all. It's really hard to stay intrinsically motivated. And that's where I find body literacy can be such a gift because, yes, maybe you aren't pregnant yet, but if you are tracking some of this biofeedback, like what are my periods looking like? Am I having gas every time I eat broccoli, or has that kind of subsided? Very subtle things that maybe you wouldn't notice if you weren't tracking your biofeedback can be intrinsically motivating and really eye opening. And
Mhm.
also
Mhm.
staying focused on the long process in this body literacy piece, because if you are having issues with your immune system or your gut health, these are going to be passed on to not only your babies, but your grandbabies, so your baby's babies. So
Yeah.
trusting this process that you could rush it and use a bunch of medications maybe to get pregnant sooner, but is that going to give you the outcome of the healthiest baby that you could possibly have, and the baby that's going to be easy to care for that reason and joyful and all of those pieces that I think people
Exactly.
forget about when they're just so desperate to get pregnant, which I've been there, I can understand, but it's a larger picture than just that pregnancy.
Yes. And you don't really need a lifetime of changes. You need to focus on about 3 to 4 months before conception. Even if you go the IVF route, a lot of IVF clinics have a 3 to 4 month waiting period. So you might as well utilize that waiting period the best you can. So no matter which way you go, IVF or natural, when you think about it, it's just a matter of a few months, let's say 3 to 6 months, where you really need to focus on yourself, your partner's health, and that's gonna matter for your future
Yeah.
generations, at least 3 generations ahead.
And make the pregnancy and the birth so much easier and safer and
Exactly.
have
Yep.
better outcomes. I recently just took a really awesome course on mastering the pediatric microbiome and also looking at adult microbiome in terms of fertility. And it is wild to look at just a very intricate test that's going to tell you about all the different bacteria that are growing and how different invaders are going to either
Mhm.
positively or negatively affect your pregnancy. They can really predict how successful IVF is going to be, whether
Oh,
preterm
interesting.
labor is in a big risk, preeclampsia, all of these things can be tested through a gut test before you get pregnant. And so that's a pretty
Nice.
powerful tool to improve your gut health before you even go the IVF route, if that's something you want to do.
And I assume they're testing the gut health of both partners.
Um, it's interesting because her vaginal microbiome is actually a big indicator, a
Okay.
huge
Okay.
piece. And yes, I do
Yes.
think dad has a huge opportunity to, his sperm turnover is a lot quicker than ours.
Yes. About 75 days.
Yeah.
Is-
I love working with men for that reason. And also, like, even something as simple as exercise is going to improve our gut health. So it doesn't have to be huge, dramatic changes all at once. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think you talked about when people are feeling beat down and exhausted, and that emotional piece is sometimes the permission to just do a little bit less can really get us pretty far in our journeys.
True. We've talked before, and you've mentioned that moving beyond diagnosis like PCOS or endometriosis, you talk a lot about this. It's a lot more than just a specific chronic condition. And a lot of the chronic conditions, especially reproductive health, seem to stem from similar root issues. It's usually metabolic and hormonal dysfunction or a blood sugar imbalance, inflammation. So I'm curious, is that what you mean when you say you help people move past this label, past the diagnosis, and you help them reconnect with their body?
Absolutely. I think people can get really bogged down in a diagnosis and feel really defeated. And again, we get to that sort of emotional piece. There's so many things that are bad for us in the world, right? It's just hard to exist in 2025 and have a pure lifestyle. Like, you're going to be
Yeah.
exposed to something that is, quote, bad for you. So figuring out what the minimal effective dose in terms of how hard you have to work at being healthy, I think is important. So
Yep.
rather than just being like, oh my gosh, I have PCOS and it means that I need to eat this, and I can't eat those foods ever. And if gluten ever touches my plate, I'm never going to get pregnant. And just feeling really overwhelmed with the diagnosis.
Mhm.
Slowing down, starting to take some biofeedback notes, starting to notice what makes you feel better, what makes you feel worse, and using that as your intrinsic motivation, because everyone is going to be a little bit different. And what you discover about yourself on the road of writing notes about what's going on with your body can be really, it isn't always going to be as clear cut as just like what you're supposed to do for endometriosis.
Yeah. Yep, because we're all very individual. There's no one size fits all approach. And
And that's how everything is. Sure, we can find a reason why you have PCOS, or a reason why your periods are so painful, or a reason why you didn't get pregnant, and maybe you can solve that thing and get pregnant. But looking past that on how you actually feel is going to help create a much healthier pregnancy, better outcomes, and this long-term connection to your body that you then can pass on to your kids so that they are also motivated to feel really good. I don't know, I think about the future when my kid goes to a birthday party and we can talk about whether or not they really want to eat all the candy with the food dyes, and I can let that be an option for him based on how he felt last time he ate all of that food. So that's my hope, is that this connection to my body I can pass on to my kids.
yep, yep. What are some signs that someone is not tuned into their body's signals? And how can that create challenges on your fertility journey?
I notice that it generally is the most emotional, hardest piece when people come to me. They're like, why can't you just give me a food plan? And I'm like, I don't really know what you're going to need yet. So at first, I really ask everyone to not change anything at all and just start taking notes. And it can be a very emotional process because I think we've been trained to almost tune out what it feels like inside of our bodies.
Mhm.
So connecting to that is hard. And I think the way that I coach it is, let's choose 3 pieces of biofeedback, and I can give you a list and you can choose with what feels the most comfortable, and then you'll track those 3 pieces of biofeedback every single day
Little
alongside
steps. Yep.
what you're eating and how you're sleeping and all of that stuff. And from there, we'll get some insight. And maybe you'll be motivated to start tracking a few more pieces, or maybe you'll really notice some missing pieces in those 3 pieces that you've been following. And you can like tune in a little bit deeper and say, hey, I noticed, I've been keeping notes for 2 weeks, and I noticed that every time I have dairy, I feel so lethargic. And a lot of people, I mean, I work with really type A individuals. A lot of people are really willing to work hard, but they
Yeah.
still don't want to necessarily feel what it feels like inside their own bodies because it doesn't feel good and they're not where they want to be. And so slowing down and just accepting where you are right now as information and not something bad or that you're doing wrong is a huge mindset shift.
100%. I also like that your approach is taking a few steps at a time so it doesn't feel overwhelming because sometimes hearing about, okay, I might need to make changes to my nutrition. Oh, and also my environmental health and cleaning all the toxins at home and this and that. And it can become really overwhelming.
Really,
So focusing on a few things at a time, I think it can really help.
it's huge. And then also you can see what is minutia for you. So like someone, not saying that necessarily perfume is good for anyone. It's definitely not. But some people may be able to put on perfume and feel fine and not be too affected. And I still wouldn't recommend that they use it all the time. But some people
Mhm.
might take perfume out of their house and then pass someone on the street and feel like they're going to throw up because all of a sudden they become aware of how it feels inside their body when they are exposed to scents. So I think being able to accept that we all have a very different genetic profile and different things are
Mhm.
going to make it or break it in terms of our health is really nice. It's weight can be lifted off your chest once you realize what's really critical for your health versus what's minutia.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't need to make all the changes out there because your body also goes through different detoxification pathways and processes.
And we don't necessarily all have the money to pay for all of the changes all at once. So, like making small incremental changes as we run out of things can be a really great way
Yeah.
to approach it. Again, looking at food, and I was told this food was really bad, but when I eat it, nothing really that negative happens to me, and I don't eat it that often. Then maybe we don't make a big deal about it. Just kind of let it
Yeah.
come in and out of your life as is. And that way you can expend the extra energy to really eliminate or work hard at the big game changers for you individually.
So your body is really talking to you every day. It's like a two-way conversation. And like we mentioned, it's not a one size fits all approach.
Totally. And that way you can approach it with a little bit more compassion. I think also my clients will be like, oh, I messed up. I hear that a lot. I messed up. We had decided I wasn't going to eat this and I ate it. I messed up. And I'm like, do you want to think of it as a mistake or as an experiment? Like, how did you feel afterwards? And sometimes they say, oh, I felt really bad. I like couldn't get out of bed the next day, or my periods that had been feeling so much better were so much worse. And I'm like, okay, let's use that as information. But sometimes they're like, nothing really happened. And then I'm like, well, I'm only making suggestions here. You're trying them out. Maybe it is my
Mhm.
for you. So getting really curious and looking at everything as an experiment versus like you screwed up the whole plan is a great approach that I recommend to anyone, whether they're working with me or not.
So less judgment, more curiosity
Yeah.
about how your body works,
And that's just going
learning
to
from
lower
that.
your stress too.
Yep. You've mentioned that muscle is the organ of longevity. What do you mean by that? And how does that relate to fertility?
So before we talk about how it relates to fertility, let's just talk like larger picture. Being strong is going to make everything in your life easier, whether you're giving birth or carrying around a toddler while you're nursing your baby, or you're trying to squat on and off the toilet in your 80s, or you are in menopause and you're starting to lose some bone mass and you're worried about breaking bones. So your muscle is going to protect your bones. Your muscle is your heart. It's going to keep your heart strong. Your muscle is going to help keep all those tendons and ligaments and everything in place as you age. Your muscle is going to help you move through life. It's also like a reservoir for glucose,
Mhm.
so it's going to help keep your blood sugar stable. The list is endless. If you want to age as gracefully as possibly, stay strong. And I think it's important to note that every single year it is more and more difficult for us to synthesize protein as we age. So our protein demands increase every single year.
Mhm.
So it's not just about exercise, because exercise is great. It will make you stronger if you are fueling appropriately. But if you are exercising and you aren't fueling appropriately, all you're doing is tearing down that muscle tissue. So looking at that as a bigger picture, what am I eating that's going to help keep my bones and tendons and joints and muscles strong? And then as it relates to fertility, it's all of those other things. It's going to help keep inflammation low. It's going to help keep your immune system healthy. It's going to keep you strong so that when you are pregnant, you can move through that pregnancy well and your blood sugar stays stable. And
Yeah, because a lot of people think of muscle in terms of aesthetics and fitness, but it's way more than that.
it's so much more. And yes, it's great for aesthetics. That's why I found it in the first place, but it is way more than that. And you also can think, if we're looking at it from a nutritional therapy standpoint of eating enough protein, and I want to make that even bigger than just protein. I think they're moving past the idea that there are essential amino acids, and we're starting to understand that all amino acids are essential. But if you are also looking at gelatin intake, collagen intake, all of these things that are going to help keep your joints and tendons strong, once
Mhm.
your body gets all the protein it needs for muscle, it's going to then move on to your skin, your hair, your nails, your bones, your joints, which are all things that are important to us aesthetically as well. And I get so many moms coming to me concerned about their hair loss after their baby
Mhm.
about 6 months old. And, you know, you're going to lose some hair. You didn't lose any hair while you were pregnant. So some is going to happen. But if you want to
Mhm.
decrease that hair loss, eating enough protein is a really easy way to start.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some common misconceptions about strength training, particularly for women who've been trying to conceive? I know a lot of women actually fear exercise, and sometimes you get advice to slow down. Others say, oh, you can keep at the same pace. It can be confusing. And if you've been trying for a while, and especially if you go down your route, sometimes you want to be really cautious. So you stop exercising. Is that a good approach?
I really advise against that. I think everyone should do what makes them feel safe. I want to start there. And I think in our journey towards motherhood, there's way too much mom shaming. And I think we're all doing the best we can. So I think you should do what is going to make you feel comfortable as a mom, even if you don't have a baby yet. If you feel like you're harming your fetus or even your chances of having a baby, then back off. But the research right now that they're coming out with is that strength training is the most amazing thing you can do when you're pregnant. They just came out with a new study, I think 3 months ago, with a couple years worth of research. It's been hard to find. First of all, we don't care about researching women and pregnant women in general. So there aren't a lot of good studies. And then I think it's also hard to get women to volunteer for studies like this. A lot of it up until now has been self-reported. And I think what's interesting is with the rise in CrossFit about like 10, 15 years ago, there were a lot more pregnant women doing heavy strength training. And that kind of opened up this area of opportunity for people to see, hey, these babies are being born very healthy and strong, and the moms are healthy and strong, and their pregnancies are easier, and their births are easier. And you know, what's interesting is when I did IVF with my first son and they're only 20 months apart, they like really advised me not to do any exercise after my transfer. And I
Mhm.
chose personally not to take that advice and to exercise anyway because I knew that it would keep me mentally healthy. And that was the most important part. With my second son, they didn't give me that advice, which I think is a
Right.
sign that the research is improving. And I think it's important for us to remember, though, is that you can only exercise to the point of strength that you already have. And I think that you want to hold on to that during your pregnancy as well. Not in the sense that they used to say you can't put on muscle when you're pregnant. That's actually not true at all. You can get stronger while you're pregnant. But if you don't have any foundation in strength training, if you aren't already strong and you
Hmm.
go and you try to do something while you have a bowling ball in your belly and your center of gravity is
Yeah,
off,
I
you
love that. Good
likely will
idea.
get hurt. I don't think it's going to hurt your
Yes.
baby, but you will likely get hurt. So I think, just like we talked about before, making changes before you get pregnant,
Yep.
I would say a year before you get pregnant, it's a great time to go and hire a strength coach and really get into the best shape of your life, because I will tell you unequivocally, it will make both the birth, the recovery, and the entire process of being pregnant so much easier. I promise. That is the one guarantee I can give people.
How do you incorporate strength training into your clients' routines?
So I have a couple different offerings. One, I can work one-on-one with people on their strength training. I think especially if you don't have any experience strength training, this is a great avenue. And I do this both on Zoom, and in person is of course optimal, but I have plenty of clients that have been working on Zoom with me for a long time. I think I had a couple big injuries in my early 30s, and I couldn't demonstrate anything to my clients. So I got really good at verbal cues a long time ago.
Mhm.
So I enjoy coaching on Zoom. I think it works well if you are like, I have one client who his only time to train is at 5 in the morning. So for him, being
Yeah.
able to log on at 5 in the morning keeps him consistent and very strong. If you have the ability to come and work with me in person, I think I'm going to be able to give you a lot more cueing, see you from a lot more angles, and
Yeah.
also I have more equipment to offer you. But if you are someone that already has experience, or if you aren't willing to invest yet in one-on-one training, another thing that I offer is writing a customized program for a client. And I do think customization is huge. So I would do a consult with you, learn where you're at, and then I
Mhm.
would write you out a program with links to my YouTube page demonstrating the exercises, and then invite you to send videos of yourself doing the exercises back to me so that
Mhm.
I can help with the cues.
You recently wrote an article on generational health for WOVA. Why is healing the gut before pregnancy considered a gift for future generations? We touched on this a little bit earlier.
The course that I just took uses a very new technology called shotgun metagenomics, which looks at like to the point zero percentile of every single kind of bacteria inside of your gut, which is really interesting. So I did a gut test on myself and my boys. And it's really interesting because obviously we are made up of more bacteria than we are made up of human cells. So using this information to improve the healthy gut bacteria versus worrying so much about the unhealthy ones is like a huge area of opportunity. So if your child was low in lactobacillus rhamnosus,
Mhm.
you could know exactly how low they were in that specific bacteria, and then you would get the appropriate probiotic or use the appropriate spice and herbs and food, and then
Yeah.
retest in a couple months. And it's a cheaper test to do than we've had access to before, and it's also easier. I don't know if any of you or any of your listeners have ever used like the French fry tray to do a gut test, where you poop in the French fry tray and you keep it in your refrigerator. It's a lot of work and it's a long process. Whereas this just uses a little swab that you just wipe on the toilet paper after wiping, or the
Okay.
diaper for the babies, and you can send it in unrefrigerated and get results back fairly quickly. So it's just a lot easier, cheaper, and it's opening up an area of opportunity of really learning about our gut health, or the health of our microbiome, both the vaginal microbiome and the other side.
Mhm. Mhm.
So looking at that, we want our babies are born with kind of no gut at all, which is why they say babies don't have an immune system. So what they're going to inherit initially is from the mom.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting that I had never thought about is we worry a little bit about C-sections because they aren't exposed to the microbiome. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can write in your birthing plan that you want to wipe all that area from your body onto the baby when they're born, and that will help give them a little bit of a microbiome. And then also, if you are able to breastfeed, that's another way to pass on this bacteria. And then obviously the family, just being around them, especially if you have dogs or kids, that's another great way to help build your baby's microbiome. I think some people are scared of the dogs licking the baby's face. That's actually like a really great opportunity to help your kid build their immune system. But something that I hadn't thought about before is my babies were born very quickly because I'm strong and I was able to do just one or two pushes. But actually, that's less time in the vaginal canal. So, again, less exposure to my microbiome.
Okay.
So, it could be right now, it's all anecdotal because they haven't done too much research into this, but something they're seeing that babies have less bacteria because of this in a negative way. Like they need more bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
So, all that being said, understanding the health of your vaginal microbiome is a great way for you to start making those changes. So if you're low in a certain bacteria or too high in a bacteria that, let's say, might lead to preeclampsia or preterm birth, you can start working on that before you get pregnant by taking a specific probiotic or changing your diet a little bit or even adding in more exercise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then your baby is going to be born with a healthier immune system. I have to say, from having two kids with really healthy guts, it just, again, anecdotal, I think it's a lot easier if your baby has colic and is having trouble like spitting up a lot and is really upset. It's just harder to deal with a baby like that.
Yeah.
Taking that into consideration as you're making these changes. But then as they age and we have these like 10 years to help build their immune system because as they get older, it's harder to change the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So this can make a difference of asthma, allergies, eczema, all of these things as they get older, even some chronic autoimmune conditions. And then when they decide to have their babies, that's going to come into play as well. So this is something that can be passed on generation to generation. So it's a huge gift that we can pay forward.
Yeah. As a parent, you have a huge responsibility and you're responsible for setting up a strong foundation for your kid.
Totally.
Therefore,
And now that I have a 2-year-old, and this is only the very beginning, I know it gets worse. It is like free will is pretty difficult, right? So as much impact that we can make on our kids when they are like just lying there smiling at us or not even conceived yet, I think we should take advantage of it because right now it's hard to make any influence.
yep, I can confirm that. Also, having a 2.5-year-old. About this test, I'm curious, is doing one test enough? Because your microbiome, doesn't it change with every meal on a daily basis? Or would you say some of those bacteria, if they detect them, there's something wrong, they're not from yesterday, let's say. They're not from the last meal, but they've been
Yeah.
there for a long time.
So I would say it's definitely not from the last meal. It's going to be enough in the sense that it will give you the information to start making the changes. And then it's
Mhm.
probably a good idea, especially if you are trying to conceive, to then go ahead and take another test about 6 to 8 weeks later to see if the changes you made have been impactful or if you need to take it up a notch.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. That's very interesting. How does your approach to nutrition, rooted in ancestral health, support gut healing and fertility?
So I think if we look at how our hunter gatherer cultures ate, it's really interesting because they weren't exposed to a lot of chemicals, they weren't exposed to a lot of plastic, they used everything that they had available to them. They were not wasteful at all. And they were so much healthier than us. And I don't think there was a huge trouble to conceive. Like it was not a big issue.
Yep.
And what's actually really interesting. I have not done a ton of research into this, but I was taking a course and I was listening to this woman talk who's like an expert in PCOS. And she said that actually a long time ago, PCOS was a biological advantage because you could still get pregnant. You would still have a couple babies, but maybe you wouldn't have 10. And
Mhm.
I thought that was like a really interesting thing to think about. She was like, usually in these ancient cultures, I don't want to misquote her, but it was something along the lines that they were usually like the more dominant women in the tribes because they didn't have quite as many babies to deal with. So
Oh,
I thought
interesting.
that
That
was
makes sense.
fascinating. And it's so different than now when you have PCOS, you're almost looking at it like, oh, I'm infertile. So it was much easier to get pregnant, and you have to look at what they were being exposed to. And so I like to look to start of like how can we consume like everything that we have available to us. So, are you going to just throw away the scraps, or are you going to find a way to incorporate them in your meal by like slow cooking the leaves of your beets and
Mhm.
putting them into a stew, and then making sure that you're using your bones and your joints and your tendons and the liver, and kind of making it all enjoyable and delicious and part of your meal.
I really like what you mentioned about PCOS, looking at it from a different angle. It reminds me of I've read genetic mutations that happen over time. For example, people in Europe, when the plague was happening, the people who survived the plague were the ones who had iron overload, basically.
Oh, interesting.
Um, Another example I was thinking of, some people have trouble sleeping and are not very deep sleepers, and others sleep very well. And they talked about this as well, that in the past, you would appreciate people who are light sleepers so they can always hear if the enemy comes along.
Totally.
But then you also need the deep sleepers so they can be very alert next day. So a lot of these things have an explanation. And nowadays we think of them, oh, it's a bad disease, or oh my goodness, this is infertility. It's a disease. And it just has such a negative connotation, but it has a reason behind it.
And it's like a great opportunity again to be curious, right? So, like right now,
Mhm.
obviously, I'm not sleeping really deeply. I'm sleeping with my infant, but I don't feel that tired. And it's like my hormones are making adjustments right now for this point in time. And I've realized that right now it's still important for me to get my strength training in and do certain things for myself during the day other than take a nap, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend to everybody all the time because sleep is really important. We shouldn't just be working out tired to log it in as
Yeah.
exercise, but it is really important to take into consideration what season of life you're in and how you're feeling, and is it working for you, and move from there rather than like having these like black and white statements about exercise, health, fitness, all of these things.
Yeah, I agree. After Vicky was born, and she's never been the greatest of sleepers. And I have to say, for the first couple of years, I had to stop exercising altogether because I was so sleep
Yeah,
deprived. So I'll just take a break, and when the time is right, I'm gonna go back to it. So, like you said, listen to your body. You cannot be perfect all the time.
totally.
Beyond that, what lifestyle changes do you advocate for to promote gut health and prepare the body for conception?
I think there's a ton of dietary ones that we could go into, but the first thing that popped into my mind when you said that is just being outside more in nature. I think that is
Mhm.
going to help your immune system. It's going to help your gut health. It's going to help exposure to good bacteria. Vitamin D actually functions as a hormone in your body, not as vitamins. So, getting as much sun exposure, making sure that you're not just exposing yourself to sun with a hat on and sunglasses, that you're really like getting the sun on your body.
Yeah.
So, maybe not like right around noon every day, but in early morning, and then as the sun is setting, it's great times to get some sun exposure. It's just going to calm your nervous system, doing some grounding, connecting, maybe taking off your shoes and standing in the grass. And
Mhm.
I just think it's a great reset and a really, really simple place to start that Sometimes the simple changes aren't always easy, but you
Yeah.
can just commit to going outside somewhere in nature for just 5 minutes a day. It's going to be hugely impactful. And most of us have to supplement too because of like where we are in the hemisphere. Like you're not necessarily getting as much as you need,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is a really great place to start. And it's interesting because I have so many clients that might be deficient in lots of things and not really notice. Vitamin D, because it functions as a hormone, you really do notice. So many of my clients will be like, oh my God, everything changed for me when I started supplementing with vitamin D. And it's just such a simple change. So, yes, getting outside is enormous.
And maybe a couple more lifestyle changes you want to mention.
So I think I want to encourage like taking some notes, maybe choosing 3 points of biofeedback. So I think three really easy ones to start with are energy, how your gut is feeling, like maybe paying attention to your bowel movements every single day, and then your hunger cues. Those are like three really easy ones to start with. So are you starving all day or are you never hungry? Those can be like very telling. And then
Mhm.
pairing this information with kind of a log of what you're eating and how you're moving, because then after about a month, you'll have a month worth of data that you can look through and see. And especially for women, you maybe want to do a couple months. So if you want to see if different things fluctuate throughout the month, like maybe you can eat dairy 3 weeks of every month and 1 week of every month, it just makes you feel terrible. And that is great information. And it probably also would be impactful on your fertility journey. It probably goes deeper than just how you feel, because any way that you feel is just information your body is sharing with you. And again, going back to that kind of curiosity. So when your body is, quote, upset with you, maybe offering it some gratitude and saying, thank you for
Mhm.
communicating. I think one of the biggest ones I ever had was I was working with a client who was fairly young. She was in her early 20s and she had been just like really struggling with different stomach issues and feeling really defeated about it. And she called me one day and she said, so the other day I threw up again and I don't know why. And I was really upset. And then I looked in the mirror and I looked at myself and I said, thank you. Thank you for telling me that something is wrong. And I just love that mindset shift that she's young, right? So if her body is telling her that something's wrong, she has like a huge opportunity to fix it
Yes.
and get better and go on to have kids in her 30s and age with them and go into her 60s and hopefully avoid cancer and live a long and healthy life. And I think people who are so disconnected from their bodies that like they don't feel anything, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
they're 65 and they get diagnosed with breast cancer and they die 6 months later. I'm sure your body was trying to talk to you for a really long time. So flipping this narrative that when I'm sick or when I can't do something or when I'm not strong enough or when things aren't happening for me the way that I'd like, it isn't a bad thing. It's like your body trying to cue you in before things get really bad is like a great way to approach this journey towards body literacy.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. Same with infertility. When you're trying to conceive, it's not working. That's a perfect opportunity to understand why it's not working and improve your health.
And I don't have all the data on this, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm over 40 and I did IVF. So there's all these risk factors to my birth that they kept trying to scare me with. I remember feeling really frustrated because I was like, they're not looking at me at all. They're
Yeah,
just looking
just
at the fact that I did IVF and that I'm over 40, and there's no consideration into my actual metabolic health. I obviously needed to do IVF because I was having this baby on my own and I knew that I wanted to have multiple kids, so I was discouraged from doing IUI. But I think if people are doing IVF because they've been really struggling on a fertility journey and they haven't addressed any of the reasons why they're having trouble getting pregnant, then yes, all of the risk factors are going to be there when
yeah.
they get. But if
Yeah,
they've gotten really healthy and they're still like need that little extra push to get pregnant, it's going to be a different story. So I think stepping away from statistics and really tuning into
exactly.
yourself and trying to make things work in your favor is going to be hugely impactful.
Yeah, because if you go into IVF without fixing the root issue, then you might end up having multiple IVFs until you conceive, if you do conceive, versus you take care of your health, focus on this for 3 to 4 months, 6 months before conception, and you might end up conceiving naturally, maybe needing one IVF
Yeah,
instead of multiple.
exactly.
What's one thing you always recommended when it comes to reproductive health or supporting others in their trying to conceive journey?
I think you deserve to know that your body is trying to tell you something and that you are more powerful than you think.
I love it. Love it. And my last question, why are you part of the WOVA network? What does it mean to you?
I'm part of the WOVA network because I think what you are doing is truly spectacular. I think both men and women need to have the opportunity to really learn about how to conceive in a holistic way and without judgment and with as much support as possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Sylvia. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much for doing this. I think it's so important.